Hey Emma,
Yes, Madeline.
why did some gamers go to their local GameStop this month?
I don't know. Why did they?
Forza Horizon! Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I thought it was funny that there were multiple series that were referred to as the Horizon series now.
There you go.
I know everyone's given up on it in favor of Elden Ring, but you know, that doesn't sound like any of our games. The Elden King of fighters.
Exactly.
Anyway, I'm your, oh my god, I always think I'm going to be good at fighting games and then I'm freaking not, host Madelyn.
I'm your, I haven't driven a car in years, host Emma.
Thanks for tuning into the show. We're disaster. We're going to be disasters talking about these games. I was reading reviews of both of these, and like in both cases, sometimes it was like, why did they put someone who doesn't care about cars reviewing this car game? And why did they put someone who doesn't know anything about fighting games reviewing this fighting game? And now here we are, knowing nothing about fighting games or cars, talking about this week's games, King of Fighters and Forza Horizon 5.
Yeah. We've talked about what was the last fighting game we talked about? Guilty Gear.
Guilty Gear. I know. It's a big fighting game quarter.
Yeah.
I think. Let's talk this. Researching this forced me to remember what netcode is again, to know what netcode is.
Yeah.
I was reading about that. I was like, dear God.
Maybe you can explain it this time if you've done further reading on it.
I can't explain what it is, okay? I just saw it again and I was like, here I am, I'm the me, and I'm like, here we go again. To netcode. So as Emma, I mentioned, I think last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, I can't remember when you made this observation. We're talking about them in this order, but we could have talked about them in the other order. The original Forza Horizon is actually now just 10 years old. And of course, Forza Motorsports is a little older than that. And they just released, like 2 weeks ago, a new King of Fighters.
King of Fighters 15.
And there you go.
That's a lot of fighter kings.
It's a lot of kings of fighters.
Yeah.
So let's start there. Let's start with King of Fighters. Would you believe it from the title that it's a fighting game?
No.
They kind of bury the lead. Like a little bit, like who would have guessed? Anyway, it's a fighting game which is itself also, it's like, I know what that genre means, but imagine describing a game to someone as a fighting game who didn't know what video games are. They'd be like, thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Fighting game.
True.
All
video games are fighting games.
But it's a fighting game. From SNK. First one was released in 1994. That's King of Fighters 94, in case you're keeping track. For the Neo Geo MVS arcade system. If you also didn't really ever think about the fact that there are different arcade machine systems and that you could move from platform to platform before this, well, you and me both, buddy.
I read a little bit about the Neo Geo, and what was sort of unique about them is instead of having to get a whole new cabinet for the next game, you would just switch out, like, the cartridge inside, basically. So it was a lot cheaper to update games in that way, which meant also that King of Fighters arcade games were cheaper than other arcade games.
I had seen that, and I hadn't really done the research into why they were cheaper, but it's apparently led to them being quite popular in China and in Latin and South America, because they're just way more affordable than having to buy a brand new cabinet.
Yeah.
Even though they don't make them for the Neo Geo anymore, obviously, but, you know.
I read a whole article on why King of Fighters is so popular in Latin America. But let's talk a little bit about the game, and then we can get into that, I guess.
Oh, listeners, I wish I could tell you about the game.
You don't have a lore corner ready, Malin?
No, I do sort of have a lore corner. I do find the lore of fighting games especially intimidating because it is both so dense and so, like, where is it?
Yeah.
Where is that lore?
King of Fighters is especially interesting because it was originally conceived of as a crossover between SNK's other fighting franchises. So it features
Smash.
Characters. No, it's not Super Smash. It's Kingdom Hearts.
I know it's not. I know. You're right, of course.
You know why it's Kingdom Hearts? It's Kingdom Hearts because it was initially conceived as a crossover with a few original characters to sort of tie storylines together, and since then it has become more and more its own thing instead of a crossover event. Hence why it's Kingdom Hearts before Kingdom Hearts of fighting games. Not
You're
Super Smash,
right.
like every article I read compared it to.
Well,
it's like,
put this audiogram out there.
What a simple comparison when there's something so much more illustrative right there in your grasp.
I did see something say, oh, the lore is not as complicated as Kingdom Hearts, and missed opportunity to just say it is Kingdom Hearts. You're absolutely right. Anyway, if you're familiar with SNK, or if you're familiar with the fighting game genre, you might know that they maybe have too many fighting games. Or at a certain point in their history, they sort of realized, specifically in 1994, or I guess a little before that, they realized, we have a lot of fighting games here. Maybe it would be good for us to take some of these series and kind of like smash them together. Sorry, not to use the word smash, but kind of smash them together so we can kind of, bring all these characters that people like in one place and also not cannibalize our own market here. And thus, King of Fighters was born, featuring characters from SNK series Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting. If you've played Super Smash, you might recognize Terry.
Yeah. That's why I looked at things before I looked at, like, the Wikipedia article, and I kept seeing Terry, and I was like, I thought Terry was from a different franchise. And then I looked it up, and then it made sense.
Like Cloud Strife from the Kingdom Hearts series. Right?
Exactly.
Anyway, Sephiroth from Square's Kingdom Hearts.
Yes.
Anyway, so this is a fighting game, features these characters as well as original characters. The original protagonist of the first, like, 4-ish King of Fighters is a young Japanese martial artist named Kyo Kusanagi. And he serves as the protagonist for the first game, and then for not Fatal Fury. There's too many fighting games. King of Fighters then serves as the protagonist for King of Fighters 95 through 97 as well, known as the Orochi Saga, where you also meet his rival and you fight against bring down the Orochi clan so that Orochi, the dragon, can't come back. If you played Okami, Orochi is in that. Are you familiar with Japanese folklore? I guess is what I really should have said.
Yeah.
But it seems more likely, listeners, that you've played Okami than you are familiar with Japanese folklore. Although who am I to say?
I feel like Orochi is like a figure that shows up in a lot of Japanese media in variously faithful interpretations of the figure.
Orochi is dope, Can't complain. So the trick of King of Fighters that sets it apart from its fighting game brethren is that instead of it being a one-on-one match-based system where, you lose match 1 and then everybody goes back to full health and you start match 2 and then you win match 2 and then the final fight in match 3 kind of situation. Instead, you play with teams of 3 in kind of an ongoing fight. So you'll start with your first fighter fighting their first fighter. Maybe you lose, but you've knocked down their fighter's health a little bit. Their fighter gets a little recharge of health headed into your second fighter coming out, and you kind of continue that way. So there's a lot more potential for, if you know how to play the game, that is. There's a lot more potential for kind of late match turnarounds, because it's not like once you've lost 2 matches in a best of 3, you've lost. If your third character is really powerful and you've got a lot of power stored up, you can do a lot of damage and turn things around.
Yeah, in the first game, the groups of 3 were fixed, like you picked from different groups of 3. But everything after that, you're allowed to like pick your own group of 3 for the fights. That's also another way that it was perceived as having more value per like cent in the arcade machine, because you got to use like 3 different characters with a single credit.
So really, King of Fighters is just the discount fighting game of your dreams.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the lore is too confusing for me. But here's the overview of the lore. King of Fighters 94 centers on Rugal Bernstein, who's an arms dealer, throwing this tournament. But the point of this tournament is that he's somehow going to turn the winners into statues that he keeps. Including, eventually we find out, and sorry, spoilers for a 25-plus-year-old arcade game, but here we go. You eventually find out that Kyo's father, Kyo, protagonist here, has been turned into stone here. And so, you know, he has to avenge him. It's a lot. And as someone who attempted to play some of King of Fighters 94, I didn't get a single cutscene or anything explaining that. To be fair, I did not succeed in winning a single 3-person match. So,
well, yeah, that might have been it.
I got very close one time. I'm really bad at these games. It did not help that you warned me, you sent this to me, you were like, I don't know if this is the best port, but it's $3. So if you want to own the first 4 or 5 King of Fighters games, you can take advantage of the sale on PlayStation Network right now for the PlayStation 2, like, 10th anniversary ports or whatever. It was very confusing to me because the controls didn't always seem to be mapped to the things that they should be mapped to, and that the tutorial was like, press the Q button. I was like, what the heck is the Q button? When has there ever been a Q button on a PlayStation controller? So, did not go great for me.
Yeah, I just saw the sale in a tweet from the Cheap Gamer account by chance, and a couple of the replies were like, these ports are not very good. But I was like, well, for the sake of the podcast, if it's $3, Malin might like to try it anyway.
It was gonna be my only way to play the game. I mean, I guess I could have bought the new King of Fighters, but
yeah, I didn't think you'd want to do that.
Anyway, continuing through the series, King of Fighters 98 is the first to take on their dream match. It's not really a spin-off, but their dream match version of this, where instead of it being, you know, a story set in a tournament, it's instead like a dream match bringing together all the characters.
Yeah, apparently that's just like a fighting game term. Like occasionally the series will make a game that's a dream match game that is just like fan service and bringing back characters that are long dead in the franchise, or just putting the superstars against each other without worrying about like whatever ongoing plot that they have going on in their series.
See, that's just astonishing to me, because if I was developing one of these games, I would not think that the bounds of death really dictated what characters were allowed to be in my game. Especially in an arcade game. Like, it's one thing to be like, oh yeah, like, the character that died in Mortal Kombat 9 for the PlayStation probably shouldn't appear in Mortal Kombat 10 for the PlayStation 3. Those are not the right platforms. That was just made up. Like, fine. But it's another thing to be like, yes, this game that I made for an arcade cabinet, the character that died in that game shouldn't appear in the next one. No, who's going to know that?
I think it's more for, like, the story part rather than, like, online, like playing against other people, to be fair. So
I guess. Fair enough. Anyway, then in 99 through 2001, we moved to the Nests saga, which is a evil corporation that's trying to make, like, mutant fighters, basically. New lead character. Something that you see, it's kind of unusual for this genre of game. The King of Fighters is much more willing to swap its main characters throughout. And even from the first game of not making, like, Terry or one of the really well-known people bringing in from the other games the main character of it.
Like I said, Kingdom Hearts.
I know. But here we have K apostrophe as the lead character. How do you pronounce that? I don't know. Then SNK goes bankrupt. Another company makes the games for a couple of years. And then we have Tales of Ash, who is another fighter doing fighter things from 2003 on. As you may have guessed, this was an annual release series through the early to mid 2000s. And then after that, so they were like, all those annual games. And then I guess into 2010, they stopped the yearly release schedule. And since then, there have only been 2 releases. King of Fighters 14 in 2016 and King of Fighters 15 that literally just came out. When I searched King of Fighters, the first article suggested for me in the news tab on Google informed me that nude mods have been created for King of Fighters 15. Yeah. So now you know that information too. I was like, great, that's the first news article. Great.
I'm sure most PC games have a mod like that.
I know. I was just like, oh, that's the first news? Neat. Neat. But these games have released on almost every platform in some form or another. So now here they are on current gen. There's also a movie.
Of course there is.
A movie from, I think, 2010. And I feel like all you need to know about it is that they enter the sci-fi fighting world by a Bluetooth headset.
Makes sense.
So that's my summary of the movie. There you have it. It was interesting to me to read about this compared to Guilty Gear and the ways in which Guilty Gear has tried to adapt for a new era and the ways that King of Fighters sort of has not.
Well, I know when 14 came out, that was their transition to 3D models, which is basically inevitable at this point, it seems like, for all fighting games. And they were not very well received initially. But it seems like they've made some strides with 15. And it's certainly... I've read some stuff where it's certainly more accessible than previous games in the series. But I was also listening to some, fighting game people talk about it, and there was this thing of coming up with, legacy skill, basically. And, you can sort of look at different fighting series based on how much they, prioritize legacy skill. That's, if you've played several previous installments and go into this, you're going to already be pretty good at it. Mm-hmm. And whereas it might be harder for someone who's starting on a title to initially get good at that title versus people who have been playing King of Fighters for years and years and years, just because the skills build on each other, I guess, more in certain fighting games than other fighting games. And King of Fighters apparently has a pretty good emphasis on legacy skill.
Well, I also saw, though, that apparently the latest game... a lot of the reviews were saying, and listeners, it's really hard for me to read fighting game reviews, to be honest. Sometimes my eyes glaze over a little bit. Because I just, they were talking about the shatter skill, shatter shot, shatter shock, whatever it was in this new one, and, about how it triggers and what it does, and I could not make my brain understand it.
Okay.
I was like, that's a thing, yeah. That's definitely a thing. But this one has auto combos, which are apparently sort of much maligned among veteran players, perhaps. But the reviewers are also saying, okay, some of these are so easy to trigger that, it kind of feels good to start. You're going to get into the bad habit because it's just you just mash the button and it triggers. And so if you're really serious about getting into competitive play, that's kind of a bad habit to get into, even though it's got a short-term large reward. And I was like, okay, I believe you. Sure.
I was actually reading a few, though, that's yeah, you can have the single button auto combo, but you have to land those attacks. for it to trigger, right?
You know, that is highly true.
So I read a few reviews that saying you can't just button mash it. And maybe this is dependent on the character and the move that's trying to be triggered. But, like, you can keep pressing one button, but you have to press it with the right timing for it to actually work. In the same way you would if you were not doing it on one button.
I guess that makes sense.
I also saw a lot of things that's like, it has a functional online mode.
Yeah.
Like a functional and well done online mode, which is apparently pretty rare for a fighting game to roll out with like a solid base for online. I know I saw a lot of people being like, there's one feature where like if you're doing like a rank match with an opponent and you like them, you can just immediately go like out of ranked match and continue to play them for a while. Which is a pretty rare option, and it makes it convenient to like play with somebody that you like fighting against, I guess.
Do you think this is just because, like, I read this too, that fighting game online modes are often quite bad, and that the netcode reconfiguration that many of these series...
It's not even the netcode, it's just like a lot of like UI and different functionalities are inconvenient or confusing sometimes.
But do you think that comes out of all of these developers being like legacy arcade dudes?
I don't know.
It's just fascinating to me. It seems like online play... Well, I barely play anything online, so I'm not this whole episode is just me being like, I don't know anything about this. Here's my opinion. But I did read an interview with some of the lead developers on the most recent King of Fighters, and they were talking about how like they really miss kind of the in-person tournaments, and that because of COVID, well, one, they were like, remote work is hard, but two, they were like, because of COVID, they really leaned into making sure that the online play was strong. It was like, it must be interesting to be kind of simultaneously developing a game that's like going to be in arcades and that you're making sure that people can play online. Just obviously very different focuses, very different skills, very different places in the gaming ecosystem. It was also very sad. They were all like, oh yeah, the arcade we used to go to closed, so we'll go back someday somewhere else. I saw in one review of this, Paste described fighting games in general as a walled garden, which I thought was so apt. There are very few genres that I think of as quite so inaccessible, I guess, than fighting games, which doesn't make a lot of sense because there are so many that are sort of so widely beloved, and of course, what's more accessible in some ways than Super Smash?
Yeah. But
it is weird. It is weird to think about it as like, this is a game that on its surface seems so simple and like it should be really easy to get into. And it's just not. When is somebody going to make an easy fighting game?
I think it's interesting. I think that just comes from its the fan base of fighting games taking it so seriously a lot of times, like a larger proportion, because it's all the very like foundation of fighting games is the competition against another player, right?
Right.
So in that case, it's like you're putting your skill versus another player's skill, which means, of course, that you want to beat them. And if you've been playing fighting games for a long time, you get in that mindset of like taking it very seriously when you're playing like online matches in order to like improve your, standing or your cred or whatever in this game. So I think some of it's just like because it is so directly player versus player. Like, of course, there's story modes and computer type challenges as well, but the main thing is the player versus player. And I think that's where it comes from, is that there's a very high ceiling of skill that sort of raises the floor along with it, too.
I guess what's fascinating to me, though, is that I cannot beat the first level of the AI in this game. But, like, I can have I ever won a game of Fortnite? I'm not sure. But it's like Click It Boyfriend has won games of Apex Legends, right? And, like, fortunately he doesn't play that much of it anymore, or any of it anymore. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But it's like, oh, okay, like, in these, like, online PvP shooter situations, yeah, there are people that are way better than you, but you can still get lucky and win sometimes. And that doesn't
I think
feel
that's
like...
because it's the one versus group versus 1v1.
Yeah.
Like, of course, a good player can be distracted by something else that's happening, and you can snipe them from across the map because you happen to pick up, like, a good gun or whatever.
I can't do that, but you're right. That could happen.
But in fighting games, it's just you and the other guy, and there's no... At least, I mean, it's unless you're Super Smash or something. Like, in these classic fighting games, it's just you and the other guy, and there's not, like, items that you can just, like, find on the ground or environmental hazards, necessarily. That just trigger without warning. It's just, you're duking it out.
That is true. I mean, I think it also, as you were talking about, comes down to these games just don't change very much. It's hard to imagine how they would change very much.
Yeah.
But that's baffling to me. It makes sense when the game comes out every 5 years like it does now, why you'd want to buy a new one. But oh my gosh, who was buying this yearly in the mid-2000s?
Well, I think they were buying it yearly in terms of going to the arcade and checking out the new one, is the thing. I was reading about King of Fighters, and its really big popularity in Latin America and Mexico. And that was just because consoles were super expensive there. Because of taxes and scalpers and a whole variety of factors. So you'd have to have a lot of money to buy a console, which meant that the arcade business actually survived and thrived there longer than it did in the US.
That's so interesting.
Arcades were still a big regular thing into the 2000s. And King of Fighters was cheap because of the system that it was on and because of the 3-character thing. And it inspired, people to build rivalries with each other in the arcade. It became a community social thing, I guess, which was really interesting because, we had a console in 2002. We weren't going to arcades in 2002. There was maybe Chuck E. Cheese's and the Pac-Man machine at the restaurant, but we weren't we'll go to the arcade to do video games. But in different areas of the world, people were still going to arcades, and this was a yearly release for arcade machines.
What is it like to own an arcade?
I don't know.
Imagine having to
Probably
decide
stressful.
Imagine having to decide what games to buy.
Yeah.
I would just buy 20 Galagas. Nothing else. Maybe you can have a Pac-Man as a treat.
Yeah.
So speaking of Mexico and Latin America.
Yeah.
Forza Horizon 5.
Yeah.
Forza Horizon 5, as you can guess, is an installment in the Forza Horizon series, which is itself a spin-off of the Forza Motorsports series. So Forza Horizon 5 came out in 2021 from Playground for Windows and the Xboxes.
Yes. Playground Games is owned by Xbox, so it is an Xbox exclusive. Although I think it was even before they bought
Yeah,
Playground
I was going to
Games.
say they only bought Playground in 2018, I think. I think Forza has always been, because it was developed originally, the original Forza Motorsports, which came out in 2005, was originally conceived as the Xbox rival to Gran Turismo. It was one of the first games for the original Xbox. So it's
I think it's always been published by Xbox, even before it was owned by Xbox.
So in Forza Horizon 5, you get some cars, you drive around, you look at the pretty exciting version of Mexico that's been modeled.
Yes, the difference between the Forza Motorsport series and the Forza Horizon series is Forza Motorsport is very much more professional style track racing events. You go on the track and you do lots of racing. And then Forza
NASCAR
Horizon
sim.
Yes, Forza Horizon has like, it's like set around this like fictional Horizon festival that's like a racing and music festival, and has like open world environments that you can just like explore in addition to participating in more freeform racing events within the world.
It was kind of astonishing to me how many reviews mentioned Burnout Paradise as being kind of a paradigm shift for the racing genre. I hate Burnout Paradise. It ruined Burnout.
Well, I mean, that's just not what you want from Burnout, right?
I know it's not. I know.
We only did the crash modes in Burnout, so...
That's not true.
I only remember doing the crash modes in Burnout, so...
They were the best, so that's fair. No, but it was interesting to me because, so, like, plenty of reviews went out of their way to note that Burnout Paradise was not the first open world racing game, but apparently when a series as well regarded as Burnout goes for the open world setup, you know the writing is on the wall.
Yes, that's true.
And so now we have Forza Horizon 5. Playground Studio pretty much exclusively seemingly made up of people who worked at other racing studios and decided that it wasn't good enough. So perhaps no surprise that Forza Horizon is now like easily the best regarded like racing game. Maybe Mario Kart is better regarded. I don't know. It depends on who you ask. But easily the best regarded racing game series.
I think Mario Kart's probably the most like publicly like
right.
like widely liked, but in terms of like racing game enthusiasts, I guess you'll see Forza Horizon.
So this one, you're in giant Mexico. It's 50% larger than Forza Horizon 4, which was itself much, much larger than any Horizon game before it. You've got seasons, you've got weather, you've got volcanoes, temples, jungles, cities. It's on Game Pass. The cactuses have individual needles.
Yeah.
What more do you need?
They did, I mean, if you're owned by Xbox, like, this is, like, the least you can do, I guess. But in terms of, like, creating Mexico and making sure that they were, like, authentically representing Mexico, like, they did a lot. I was reading about it. They, like, went to Mexico a lot. They did photography, film footage, and mapped the skies and worked along locals in each area. They had to go several times during different seasons for like the different lighting and the different like flora and fauna. Worked with the culture ministry. They employed a political cartoonist named Lalo Alcaraz as a cultural consultant. They did a lot in terms of actually like trying to create the landscape, because they're from the UK and Forza Horizon 4 was like an idealized version of like the UK countryside, right? So they were like, we live here.
Yeah.
We can do that. But when it came to creating Mexico, they were like, well, like, we want this because there's a whole lot of variety in landscapes in Mexico that will make it an interesting place to drive around in. But we have to actually learn about what Mexico looks like in order to do that.
Do you think... Forza 3, I think, was in Australia. Do you think that they pick where their games are going to be set? I mean, you gave some really nice game design reasons there, but surely they just pick it based on where they want to go on some vacations, right?
Why would they pick the UK countryside for Forza Horizon 4 then?
They spent their whole budget flying to Australia.
They had to save money for the next one.
Yeah.
Maybe. You know, they've said, like, well, one, they needed someplace bigger. So I assume they were looking at bigger countries. And the explicitly stated reason that creative director Mike Brown said is just that it has a lot of different environments just like in one country, which makes it interesting.
Right, but if you read the full quote, he says, and I wanted to go on vacation there. Crazy what journalists will cut out.
Crazy.
So all of the reviews of Forza, well, it's interesting, right? It's kind of an interesting counterpoint to King of Fighters this week, in that obviously fighting games are a genre where not much changes as you go along, right? There's like refinements and little changes, but you don't see like a revolutionary reimagining very often, if at all. And racing games feel very much in a similar, if not quite the same, but a similar sort of space. It does sound like Forza Horizon 4 was a really huge step forward in terms of introducing the weather and seasons and just the size of it. But all the reviews I read for Forza Horizon 5, and the reviews for this game are glowing, right? But even those glowing reviews are pretty upfront about the fact that there's not that much here that's really new. It's beautiful, and they've refined some of the UI stuff and refined a lot of it, and there's new cars, and the cars are great, and character creator's great, a lot of accessibility options, like a lot of good stuff here. But also, it's pretty much the same game that it's been for the past few iterations, and does it need to be more than that?
Well, I think it's interesting because they pick and really, like, painstakingly recreate these environments. I can't remember where I read it, but there was another quote from someone on the development team that was like, there's a significant portion of their player base that just does not do the races in it. They drive around and look at the stuff and take pictures of their car. And, like, just don't engage with, like, the more game-like elements. Like, they specifically use it as, like, a virtual tourism type thing. And so that is, like, goes into their way that they design it, because they know that that is a significant part of their player base. So part of the appeal of Forza Horizon, the new installment, is just like, where is it now? Where can I go and look at now? Which maybe means, like, just by setting it in a new location, they're doing enough to distinguish itself from the previous entry.
It's also very beautiful, obviously. I mean, the graphics for this, and apparently for the most upgraded version of Forza Horizon 4, this holds true as well, but the graphics are just supposedly, you know, almost the most true-to-life sort of thing that you can find on consoles right now.
I saw one video review that was talking about it. It was like, they modeled the inside of the buildings? Why did you do this? It's a racing game. I mean, it looks great.
Well, that's why I rolled my eyes when I heard about the needles on the cactus. Because I was like, who cares? Why was that worth someone's time? Why do we need that? Maybe games have gone too far.
Well, if a large portion of your player base is just there to take pretty pictures, maybe the graphics is actually a really important part of this experience, you know?
That's just hard for me as someone who grew up in Burnout. That's hard
if someone's going just to play this just to look at things, you want to have the needles on the cactus so that they can look at them.
That's fair. It is interesting also, again, in contrast to the incredibly niche walled garden that is fighting games, racing games, it feels like could have turned out to be just as niche as fighting games, right? They could have just very much been like about cars for car people. And this game certainly is that, and can be that. I read that for one of the, last few installments, it took them 6 months to model a car. And then they were like, maybe we shouldn't do it this way. Maybe we should ask the manufacturers for some schematics. 6 months to model one car. There are hundreds of cars in this game.
Considering that they're, like, based on real cars, it probably is a significant amount of work to get it to a point that's acceptable for, like, the manufacturer and the brand. And
no, of course. And it should be. I just can't imagine myself going to work every work day for 6 months with a team. It wasn't just one guy it was a couple of different artists working together, modeling a car for half a year. One car. One. Crazy.
I mean, they probably should have asked for schematics before that, yes.
They also say that it's like they either do that or they send a photographer to take thousands of photos of the car. It's like, great, of course. Sure. But anyway, what I wanted to say was that this could have been a genre that was very niche. And I think that Forza Motorsports, I mean, I didn't read that much about the Motorsports main series, but is quite niche. Very much like for car heads. But it's interesting how racing games, and not that there are like that many racing games that exist in this particular lane, but it's interesting that racing games seemingly intentionally and in a concentrated way continued to keep themselves accessible to just general interest players, or players of a really wide variety of interests, right? You can be very into cars and enjoy this game. You can be into it just for the virtual tourism and enjoy this game. You can like the racing elements and enjoy this game, or crashing things, right? There's so many different reasons that you can enjoy this particular game. It's really interesting, and it was really interesting to hear how much of the design of it sounds just like a normal open world game. Like there's all sorts of icons and things to do, and it can almost get overwhelming. Yeah.
But you can go fast in it.
Go fast.
You can go fast.
I guess I just wonder, you know, where do racing games even have left to go? Space, I guess.
Space. Race into space.
Or like, I guess you could introduce boats.
I think it'd be fun if there was like a tag team race where like you had to play on a team, and like there was like you had to be ready when the first person got there so that you could take off in your car and do your leg of the race.
That will never work.
I know, but I think it would be fun.
Imagine the net code you would need for that, Emma.
I don't know if you would really need netcode for that.
That was a joke. Don't worry.
The inputs aren't quite as important.
Look, to me, it's just like one of the reviews mentioned that there are multiple radio stations, and I was like, wow, look how far we've come. And then I thought, maybe we've gone too far. I don't want multiple radio stations. I want to be forced to listen to whatever the DJ thinks that I should listen to.
No, you've got to buy your music in your car so you can listen to it.
I guess so. Is there an NPR?
There should be.
Is there a news station? That'd be funny. But yeah, it's just like, it's hard to even imagine for me where, and I have no imagination, right? So, whatever. But it's hard for me to even imagine for me where this kind of game could go. Other than, I guess, introducing things that aren't really part of the genre. Like, on one hand, I guess it would have been hard. Well, I don't know. Would it have been hard to imagine an open world racing game in whatever, like 1998 or something like that, when they were all just fixed tracks? I don't know. Sort of feels like no. Sort of feels like a natural extension for the game, or the type of game. But now it's like, okay, you drive all over the place. You can do the races or not do the races in whatever order you want, and there's a lot of different kinds of them. But more is there even to do? Romancing cars, I guess.
I feel like that should be a thing, yeah.
Do you feel that way?
What?
Do you feel that way?
Yeah.
I don't need Pixar's cars, Forza Horizon.
Maybe as you woo your car, you know, it performs better for you. Isn't that like a trope in some stories? Like the hunk of junk car that you treat like a person?
I don't think that the car guys would like that, though.
I don't know. There's something to that mechanic of being nice or mean to your car, and it's nice or mean back to you.
I guess
the sentient car racing game. That's what I want.
Some of us like to crash our cars, though, Emma.
Well, then it would be mean to you back. So.
But I don't want that. Then I would just crash more.
Then you're in a toxic relationship.
Ain't that the truth?
But I read some stuff about Horizon that's like it's purposely not trying to be like RPG like at all.
Right.
because it's about the vibes. It's a vibe game. So they don't really want you to be, like, building your stats, necessarily.
It does give me the impression of being a game that is really well served, and it's clear it was really well served by being on Game Pass.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty, I mean, racing games in general are pretty approachable controls-wise. I see some multiple reviews mention that. Because, like, you know, almost everyone has played a racing game at some point, but we're also familiar with, okay, you hold the pedal to drive. So it's pretty intuitive to hold the button to drive. In a way that it's not intuitive to hit down 2 buttons, upright, square.
I assume that's what real fighting feels like, though.
Maybe. I doubt I would miss so often from not knowing how far my leg would go or my arm would go.
I don't know. You might. You know?
I hope my proprioception is better than that, but you're right, of course.
You don't use it to, like, kick people very often, so.
That you know of.
You're right. Maybe, yeah, you do.
So thoughts on how to mash up? Well, any other thoughts on Forza Horizon?
Cars go fast.
Cars go fast. Okay. How do you mash up these 2 games? Cars punch.
Cars punch. Rocket League, but fighting.
You fight, you race cars, but at the end, if you think that your opponent cheated, or it was, like, really close, you launch into punching each other out. But that's like just putting one game inside the other games. That's not very creative.
No, cars fighting.
But, like, do they have arms? Like, is this just Crash Team Racing battle mode? What is this?
No, like they use their doors.
Oh, of course. Right, my bad.
Cars fighting. You have, like, different kinds of cars, and they have, like, different types of moves. They use, like, their wheels and their doors, and maybe, like, their rearview mirrors can, like, come out in, like, a grabby type move.
Is that how you think rearview mirrors work?
No, but that's for fighting game logic, yes.
Fair enough. They'd have to be kind of anime-looking cars, though.
Yeah. They would be animated cars, yes.
No, not animated. Anime. They'd have to be, like, in the same way as all fighting games get knocked for, it's like, it's too anime. The cars would have to be too anime. The car heads would have to be like, that's not what a Nissan 97 Splushra looks
King
like.
of Fighters is pretty anime, so I think bringing that in. Like, the cars can be inspired by real cars.
Okay, yeah.
And they have, like, names that are, like, nicknames of those cars, like Subi. For the Subaru.
Yeah, the Subaru is going to be a great fighting game car, you're right.
I don't know. You know what I mean.
I do. Do you think, like, is it in, like, the 2.5D, you know, like, just side to side?
Well, yeah.
Well, I don't know. I wasn't sure what this fighting game looked like.
Like any other fighting game.
Well, but it's kind of lame that my car is, like, trapped in this, like, 2.5D space.
Why?
Well,
I guess
when do I get to look at cactus needles? Or
they're in the background, Malin.
Like, usually turning and maneuvering is such a huge part of a driving game, and so that would just be gone.
Maybe, like, you can execute moves that, like, turn the stage to, like, different parts of, like, this circle arena.
Okay.
So it's, like, in a 3D space, so, like, when you do, like, a certain dodge, it'll, like, turn the arena, and, like, your opponent will still be sort of, like, stuck in the other one for a second, and you can, like, execute a cool move while they're still, like, readjusting themselves to your new position.
Okay, I'm intrigued by that. I'm intrigued.
Like, like the way, well, like, a little more fighting gamey, but like the way Tales games work. You have to, in the older ones, you have to press down a button to, like, free run around, and otherwise it's on the 2D fighting plane.
That makes sense.
So sort of like that, I guess.
And then for the gearheads, you can customize your car to give it other weapons and that sort of thing. But, like, if you're a dummy like me who would just be like, put all the weapons on the car, that can affect, you know, maybe the transmission doesn't run right. Or it's too heavy, it sits too low on the wheels.
I like that. I like the idea of being able to, like, customize your car with different types of weapons that, like, correlate to your different, like, moves, right?
Yeah.
But maybe they take up, like, more or less of, like, your power gauge. So if you put, like, a particularly, like, heavy attack, like, it's really powerful if it hits, right? This is just how fighting game characters work, too. But it's really powerful if it hits, but it leaves you, like, wide open if it misses, of course.
Is there, like, a mode, like, is this a one-on-one fight situation, or do you have multiple cars?
I think it would have to be one-on-one fight.
Dang.
I know there's Super Smash Bros, but I just don't think, like, a classic
I didn't
type
mean,
fight. It's just like
at a time. I meant, like in King of Fighters, where you have cars in reserve.
Oh. Maybe, yeah, sure. We can bring that in. I don't have strong feelings on that. I just meant, I think having more than 2 cars in the arena at once might be too overwhelming, considering cars are kind of large.
You could have a small car. Sedan.
Yes,
sedan.
But in general, cars are kind of large.
I was just kidding. I'm sorry.
And so, if everybody picked a big car, for instance, and there were 4 cars in the arena, that might be a little bit overwhelming, is what I was trying to say.
Do you have to, like, gas up? Or are there, like, mechanic pit stops?
That's like, if you beat, like, 1 round, like, the pit stop crew comes out and fixes up your car in enough time, in the time they have before. That's, like, the justification for your car regaining health in between rounds.
Nice. Probably would have to be, like, you wouldn't have health exactly. It would be, like, your car falls apart, right?
Yeah.
So as you get hit, like, the big gun falls off or you lose a wheel. There'd have to be, like, an upside to that, too. Like, as you lost stuff, there'd have to be some kind of upside. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm intrigued.
Do, like, a kamikaze move where your car blows up.
Yeah, exactly.
And brings the other one with you.
Okay, well, this seems, entirely inaccessible in a way that feels true. So, listeners, have you, I ask this every time there's a fighting game, but, like, are you into fighting games? Do you have a favorite fighting game? Have you ever played King of Fighters, whether on an arcade machine or in your home? Have you checked out the Forza series, or do you have a favorite racing game, and why is it Burnout 3 Takedown? Would you have come up with a better mashup for those? I'm still worried that maybe this is not better than just a racing game where you get to punch people afterwards, but I am worried that that's maybe just Grand Theft Auto, so, okay.
I don't know if you really do much racing in Grand Theft Auto.
Well, Grand Theft Auto with more racing then, how about that?
Okay.
Anyway, if you got thoughts on any of that or anything else from this episode, hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can learn all about the show, check out the games from the virtual hat Emma's about to pull our next selection from, and read our blog featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend and Split Screen. Most importantly, though, if you enjoy the show, you should subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, really anywhere that you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This. Next week is our 6 weeks in gaming side quest, which is unbelievable that it's almost March. But here we are. But in 2 weeks, Emma, what are we going to be talking about?
Our old game is going to be Ghost Trick Phantom Detective.
Cool.
I've been putting... This will be very inconvenient for you, but I've been putting more DS games in the hat in celebration of its demise.
Why are you doing this to me? I can't play those. But okay, fine, whatever.
And our new game is going to be Inscription.
Nice. I've heard of that one, but I have not actually processed what it is yet.
I talked about it on one of our 6 weeks side quests, because I have played it.
I know, but I've not really processed it as a game yet.
Mal doesn't listen to me on the side quest. It's okay, I don't listen to her either. We just sort of space out until it's our turn again.
That's not true. It's just that 5 weeks is a long time.
That's true.
I'm like, oh yeah, Inscription. It's got a Y in it. I remember that.
It does. You're right. Where is the Y, though?
The script part.
Yeah, good job.
The very beginning, Inscription.
Inscription. Well, do you want to sign us out, Melon?
Sure. Listeners, I hope this week that your cactus's needles have an appropriate level of fidelity for your driving sightseeing tours.